The month of November is notorious for bringing savage weather to North America's Great Lakes. Gale force winds are common during the fall season, with November specifically being the month in which sailors look at the skies with unease, and for good reason. The Edmund Fitzgerald, the Carl D. Bradley, the Daniel J. Morrell, and countless other ships have been lost in what has come to be known as the Witch of November, the nickname given to the infamous storm system that rolls across the lakes every year. And while history has proven time and again that November is indeed one of the deadliest months to sail the Great Lakes, nobody was anticipating the storm system that would blow in that November of 1913. Over the course of just 72 hours, dozens of ships were either sunk or stranded in the Great Lakes as a result of one of the most violent weather events to hit the region. Winds topping 100 miles per hour swept across the lakes. 35-foot waves tossed freighters with relentless force, all while blinding snow squalls left captains with zero visibility. Cities including Cleveland, Milwaukee, Chicago, and Duluth were buried under snow and ice. The storm was a lethal combination of two powerful weather systems, a hurricane and a blizzard. The White Hurricane, as it came to be aptly called, left a trail of death and destruction in its path, claiming the lives of some 250 sailors. To this day, it remains the deadliest natural disaster to ever occur on the Great Lakes. It was a brutal reminder of how much there was to understand about the inner workings of storm systems. Not to mention, it put a spotlight on the dreadful lack of communication equipment aboard freighters. While wireless technology was still quite new, it did exist and was available to install, but it was deemed an unnecessary luxury by most ship owners. That's not to say having a wireless radio would have saved the day. Freighter captains in 1913 were dubious of anything the Weather Bureau had to report. Storm systems would change so frequently that anything the Weather Bureau reported would often be outdated and useless within hours. Captains who were under intense scrutiny to stay on schedule couldn't afford to take every weather report seriously. Plus, they had year-end bonuses to consider. They trusted their experience and instincts far more than they trusted any government agency hundreds of miles away. Fortunately, with the advent of modern forecasting and radar, we'll hopefully never see another loss of life as catastrophic as what occurred that November more than a century ago. But the White Hurricane will always serve as a stark reminder of what can happen when man is faced with the Witch of November. Initial reports of an impending storm that November were hardly enough to cause alarm. The Detroit News predicted moderate to brisk winds on the Great Lakes, with occasional rain over the next couple of days. The winds were indeed brisk, to say the least. Shortly after the Detroit News report, wind gusts toppled horse carriages in the streets, a warning of what was to come. On November 7th, Coast Guard stations and Weather Bureau offices along Lake Superior hoisted flags to warn of an approaching northwest storm. Later that afternoon, signal lanterns indicated a new warning, this time a hurricane. Captains and their crew members looked at the skies wondering what Mother Nature was brewing for them. Meanwhile, shipping on the Great Lakes was set to break a new record in ore tonnage that year. A New York Times article from October 1913 says that despite strikes, bad weather, and 2 double holidays, tonnage of ore shipped from the head of the Great Lakes this year will exceed the record-breaking mark set in 1912. In the Canadian province of Alberta, a storm system known as an Alberta Clipper was taking form. Named after the fast clipper ships of the 19th century, this low-pressure storm system moves quickly toward the northeastern seaboard every year. As it happened to be that November in 1913, a second storm system was coming up from the south, and rather than taking its usual path toward the Atlantic Ocean, it began moving inland, straight for the Great Lakes. By November 8th, the Alberta Clipper was upgraded to severe and centered over Lake Superior with wind gusts of 60 miles per hour. But later in the day, the storm seemed to dissipate and shipping traffic resumed. At Port Huron, Assistant Engineer Milton Smith aboard the Charles S. Price had a bad feeling when he looked at the weather forecast in Cleveland, which was being buried under snow and ice. Smith couldn't shake this feeling he was having. He decided to resign from his position, but before leaving the ship, he ran into his good friend Ars McIntosh, the 22-year-old whalesman aboard the Charles S. Price. McIntosh told Smith how badly he wanted to leave the ship too, but he needed the money for a corrective procedure for his vision. "I guess I better stick it out for another trip," said McIntosh. "So long, sailor. See you in Port Huron." Ars's body would later wash ashore in Ontario, where he would be identified by his brother and uncle. On Sunday, November 9th, the second storm system coming from the south intensified, and it was moving far too fast for the weather reports to keep up. And even if they could, many freighters at the time were not equipped with wireless radio. Ships that had already left port that morning were about to be blindsided by the convergence of these two massive systems. Temperatures suddenly dropped into the single digits as colossal waves slammed into the ships. Freighters caught on Lake Huron took the brunt of nature's fury that night. Captain Archie MacArthur on board the Isaac M. Scott found himself caught at the epicenter of the great storm. Captain MacArthur was rarely dissuaded by bad weather. 4 years earlier, during the Isaac's maiden voyage, he plowed through foggy weather conditions, determined to stay on schedule for his first run on the new ship. As it happens, he also plowed into another ship, which sank in 3 minutes, killing 14 of the 24 crewmen. That his actions resulted in the deaths of 14 crewmen and caused $30,000 in damage to his new ship didn't seem to deter the owners. He remained in command of the Isaac until that fateful November day as he watched the monster waves overpower his ship. Despite measuring 524 feet and being loaded with thousands of tons of coal, the ship eventually capsized and sank, taking all 28 crew with her. MacArthur's body would wash ashore a month later in Ontario, still wearing his life preserver. His ship would not be discovered for more than 60 years. 28 more men were lost when the Charles S. Price, also sailing on Lake Huron, was capsized. Photographs show part of the ship jutting out of the water, but its name was concealed. A diver from Detroit eventually went down to confirm that it was indeed the Price. After a week of clinging to the surface, the last of the trapped air leaked out of the Charles S. Price, and she slipped from view to make her final descent. Other ships lost that day include the Argus with 28 crew, the Hydrus with 27, the Henry B. Smith with 25, the Wexford with a reported 24, the Regina with 20, the James Carruthers with 22, the Leafield with 18, the John A. McGean with 28, the Plymouth with 7, and a U.S. lightship called the Buffalo with 6 crewmen. Debris and bodies would continue to wash ashore for weeks. Bodies of men were found wrapped in each other's arms, frozen in clusters as they abandoned ship together. Herbert Jones, a steward on board the Charles S. Price, must have been preparing a meal when disaster struck. He was found still wearing his apron. A stewardess named Mrs. Walker aboard the Argus was found wearing the captain's life preserver and wrapped in the engineer's heavy coat, indicating that the men, even when faced with impending death, demonstrated a collective chivalry with a desperate hope that they could save the one woman on board. On November 16th, 5 unidentified sailors were laid to rest in Ontario, where more than 1,400 people lined the streets to pay their respects. In one case of mistaken identity, a man named John Thompson read his name in the newspaper as among those lost on the James Carruthers. He returned home just in time to find his family holding his wake. His parents were of course thrilled he was still alive, though his dad was reportedly angry about losing the money he spent on the funeral. The body of the man that they thought was their son was among the 5 unidentified sailors buried in Ontario. All told, only about a quarter of the 250 victims were ever found. In the days following the storm, officials were trying to understand who was responsible for such a tremendous loss of life. Captains blamed the Weather Bureau for not providing adequate warnings. The Weather Bureau blamed captains for ignoring their warnings altogether for the sake of profit. In truth, it was a combination of both. Weather technology was no match for predicting the White Hurricane's next move. And freighter captains, while most of them cared deeply about their crew and the sanctity of human life, they were stubborn, and they tended to trust their instincts far more than a weather report that could change again at any minute anyway. In the end, the Lake Carriers Association gave nearly $18,000 across 153 family members of the victims. Captains' families received around $500, while family members of deckhands, stewards, and porters would only get about $75. The Great Lakes storm of 1913 was indeed one for the record books, and it was a wake-up call for the need to install wireless technology on freighters so that they could receive weather reports. An article from December 1913 announced that 50 freighters were being fitted with wireless technology, noting that the ships that had it during the storm stayed safely in the harbor. Still, there was strong opposition to require wireless radio in all commercial vessels, with the argument that it would be used for shipping companies to spy on one another. It was, after all, business as usual in the weeks following the storm. Government officials and shipowners alike were looking forward to another profitable year ahead. On January 23, 1914, a headline in the New York Times read, "Sees Big Future for the Lakes." In the article, Senator Charles Townsend of Michigan predicts that the annual volume of commerce on the Great Lakes would be 10 times as great as the most optimistic estimate of annual commerce through the Panama Canal. The report acknowledges that 1913 also broke records both in volume of business and disaster, but rest assured, that despite the inconvenience of losing 250 sailors, the business was handled profitably. Well, that's a relief. Thank you for watching today's video. If you've made it this far, please leave a like or comment to help spread the word. Your feedback and support are always appreciated.